Well, greetings from Cooperstown, New York, site of the National Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum. We're just a few days out from Hall of Fame Weekend 2023, and we're glad you could join us today for our virtual Voices of the Game program. Every few months, we like to talk to the Hall of Fame president, Josh Rawitch, and that is what we're going to do momentarily. We'll talk about Hall of Fame Weekend, the All-Star Game, our new Souls of the Game exhibit, and a few other items as well. I did want to begin today, though, by talking about what has been a difficult day for the staff here at the Baseball Hall of Fame. We learned this morning that our curator of history, John Odell, passed away at a hospital in New Jersey. John had worked at the Hall of Fame since 1999. He had been featured on several of our virtual curator spotlight programs, also Autumn Glory programs. And on a personal note, John was a friend of mine as well, and knew him for all these years, going back to 1999. And as we welcome Josh Rawitch to the program, Josh, you've only been at the Hall of Fame for the last 3 years. But I know you got to know John very well during that time. Tell us a little bit about your relationship with him, some recollections of just what kind of a great guy he was.
Yeah, thank you, Bruce, and thanks for letting me say a few words about him, because reality is, if you're watching this program, you're a big fan of the Hall, and if you're a fan of the Hall, you're a fan of John Odell's, because he meant so much to this place. If you've walked any exhibit, he had a hand in it. He cared so deeply about this, all of the exhibits, the building itself, talking to fans. He's a big Orioles fan, and so often we would talk about baseball. But really, just when you're here for 25 years in a building like this, you become family. That's what you strive for in any sort of culture of any sort of office. That we spend time here. We love each other. Everybody loves John, and is going to miss him. And we're thinking of his wife Peg and his kids and all of his friends. It's been, like you said, a very, very difficult morning around here, but we wanted to continue to have this event virtually so we could talk about him, and no doubt he's going to leave a mark for decades to come on all the things that you've seen when you walk around the building. So say a prayer for him and thoughts for him. Any of you who are fans of the Hall, we appreciate that.
One of the final projects that John worked on was our new Black baseball exhibit, which we recently titled The Souls of the Game. It's going to be opening up next year. And John was particularly involved in that project. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so that is an incredibly exciting project that we're less than a year out from opening. And from the very beginning, he just showed a great interest in being involved in it. He's had some incredible ideas, one of which we're not quite ready to announce yet, but when the time comes that we announce it, his fingerprints will be all over it. And it is ultimately a look back at the history of Black baseball through those who lived it. And for those who have been to the Hall, we've got the Ideals and Injustices exhibit, but that opened in 1997, actually before John was even here. When he got here in 99, that had already been open. So we knew it was time for us to kind of tackle this topic and really look at it differently, and the way the world has changed in the last quarter century, and the way that there's new history to look at from the last 25 years. So again, he may not necessarily be there when we open that exhibit, but his fingerprints will be all over it, and the impact he's made here is going to be here for a long time to come.
John Odell, our colleague and friend, was 62 years of age. John took great pride in the work that he did here, and for good reason. He also took great pride in the accomplishments of the Hall of Fame in general, and I'm sure that he would want us to oversee Hall of Fame weekend as well as we possibly could, and we're going to try to do that, partly in his honor, but partly because we just know it's the right thing to do. We're going to talk about Hall of Fame weekend and some other topics with Josh Rawitch. Josh became president of the Hall of Fame 2021, the 8th president in the history of this institution. John, in talking about some of the recent events that have occurred, the 2023 All-Star Game, which was held last week in Seattle. Originally, you were supposed to travel to the All-Star Game, but then something happened. Tell us about that.
Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, one of the things we do is we go there not only to meet with all the key people in the game and try to spend some time with the various all-stars and get to know them, but we often like to come back with artifacts. And unfortunately, as I was sitting on the runway for a couple hours in Albany, they had shut all the airports in the New York area. So Newark was closed, and JFK and LaGuardia. So I never actually got out there. Thankfully, 4 or 5 of our colleagues were out there, and if anybody's watching from Seattle, from what I understand, it was a great event, and our usual play ball park exhibit that we had of the Hall of Fame. We kind of put a traveling exhibit there so that you get a tiny flavor of what's here in Cooperstown. I think that went off really well, and we still came back with some pretty cool artifacts from there, but unfortunately I was not the one to gather them, and that's the way it goes. We had great people who were pulling that off in my place.
Just to highlight a couple of the artifacts that the Hall of Fame staff was able to procure for the collection, including the jersey that Rockies catcher Elias Diaz wore when he hit the game-winning home run in the 8th inning. Also a ball signed by Texas Rangers, 6 Texas Rangers players. They played in the game on Tuesday night. You had Marcus Semien, Corey Seager, Josh Young, Jonah Heim, Adolis Garcia, and Nathan Eovaldi. The Diaz story, I think, Josh, is particularly interesting. Here was a guy that really was kind of a journeyman, 32 years of age. All of a sudden had a great first half with the Rockies. I believe he was the 3rd catcher on the National League All-Star team, but gets into the game, makes the most of an opportunity, 2-run home run in the 8th inning to win it. And all of a sudden, he's known pretty well across the country. So it's kind of a feel-good story.
No doubt. And I think that's what's really neat about that game. Certainly, I mean, maybe it'd be better if you watched all of the starters play 9 innings, but realistically, that's not going to happen. And so you do get guys who in their first shot really become a major national name. And my colleague, John Shestakovsky, who was there, he and I are usually the ones that are at the World Series and All-Star and other events like that to gather these artifacts. He said he went downstairs post-game and asked Elias Diaz if he would be interested in donating something to the Hall of Fame. And I guess his answer was, yeah, what do you want? Anything you want. And Shesta said, you want maybe a bat or a jersey, whatever you want. So I think there's an understanding of just what the Hall of Fame is for players all around the league. They know we're going to look after their artifacts. They know that generations from now, in fact, actually, this is really kind of cool, probably not where I intended to take this story, but we just had yesterday Hall of Famer George Sisler's great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren here in Cooperstown. They're playing at the local tournament here. And almost 100 years after they donated an artifact, they're getting a chance to stand there and hold their great-great-grandfather's glove in their hands. And someday Elias Diaz will be able to say the same thing. And it's a really cool thing about this incredible institution.
This other artifact that I mentioned, that I guess involved a little more creativity. Someone had to come up with the idea to get the 6 Rangers signatures. Was that John that did that as well? Is that his idea?
Yeah, and in fact, I'm sure he borrowed it. I don't know where we got it from in the Fall Classic, but when there was the no-hitter during the World Series this past year, which is obviously incredibly rare, he and I were there, and you're always trying to find artifacts that help tell the story. So if a guy hits a big home run, you're going to try to ask for a bat or a jersey or something that's part of that. Or if it's a big pitching moment, quite often we'll ask for a cap. But when you have 5 or 6 people who are doing the same thing, in the case of the World Series, I think there were 4 who combined on the no-hitter, and in this case, 6 guys on the field at the same time, we don't tend to do a lot of autographs. And I think that would be maybe surprising to some fans out there. We're not a memorabilia shop. We're never going to sell this stuff. And so really it is more challenging for us to bring in something that's signed, because you have to make sure that over time the autograph doesn't fade. So we don't do that very often, but in this case, I thought it was a great idea from Shesta. And certainly, again, all of the guys on the Rangers were more than happy to be on that ball and to know that for generations to come, they'll be represented here in Cooperstown.
I'm curious, Josh, when you were either with the Diamondbacks or the Rangers, did you host an All-Star game during those years?
No, unfortunately, the Dodgers had it, I guess, last year, so I didn't get a chance. I was well past my time with them. And with the Diamondbacks, it was literally basically the All-Star break that they had it in 2011 that I got called by the team about the potential of going over there. So unfortunately, never got a chance to be part of the host team, but I think I've probably been to, I don't know, 10 of the last 30. And it's just such a special event. There's really no other All-Star game like that in pro sports. Most of them are not quite what this is, and everything from the home run derby, the futures game, We take home artifacts from those sorts of things, and it's a pretty special week. And certainly next year will be quite interesting. The game is in Texas, and then one of the players who's eligible for the Hall of Fame for the first time next year is Adrian Beltre, who many people think has a pretty good chance to be elected. And if that were to happen, it would literally go from the All-Star game on Tuesday to induction on Sunday. There's no break in there next year the way there is this year. So keeps us busy and on our toes, but we love that stuff.
It's interesting. I didn't realize that connection. Another recent event that you did have a chance to go to was something that's not held every year. It's been a little more sporadic than that. The London series in late June, Major League Baseball staged 2-game series between the Cardinals and Cubs, 2 traditional rivals, at a London stadium, more of a soccer field than an actual baseball stadium. England is not a country we think of when we think of baseball and what would be associated with baseball. So I'm curious, Josh, what was your sense of the media and the fan interest in England toward the game of baseball? You were there. What's your sense of what people think about our national game?
I had thought that it was going to be mostly expats, Americans living abroad that were checking out this game, but it seemed quite obvious to me that it wasn't, that actually there were a lot of British baseball fans. There were fans from all over Europe who would come to London for a chance to see the Cubs play the Cardinals. And I think that gives you an idea just how much the game is growing. And Great Britain had a presence in the World Baseball Classic this year, as did several European nations. And the stadium was completely packed. The media was very much into it. I've had an opportunity through my time with the Dodgers and Diamondbacks. I want to say I've seen games now in 8 or 9 countries, because both of my teams previously had done a lot of traveling throughout Asia and South America, et cetera. And the reality is post game, you always kind of get the questions in the news conference about what did people think. And David Ross was just saying it was incredible to see the reception of the fans, to feel the energy in a ballpark and to know that they're loving this as much as somebody might at Wrigley Field. I think it gives us a good idea of where the game is going globally.
You talked to any of the fans there?
I did. I sat in the stands for probably 4 or 5 innings on the first game. Was moving around the building quite a bit, but there was actually, interestingly, behind me, the guys I talked to a good amount were Dominican, and they were Dominicans living in England. I also talked to plenty of other British fans, and I think it just there's a big feel to a major league event coming to your country. And what's interesting, if you've got any Ted Lasso fans on here, it was played in the ballpark where West Ham United plays their game. So as you're walking up, I heard a lot of people making Ted Lasso jokes, but it's somewhat fitting. You get that this American coach is going to coach soccer over here, and here we are bringing this American sport to London Stadium. But it definitely worked. It had all the feels of in fact, another cool fan I talked to, not British, but John Goodman, a big Cardinals fan, happened to be sitting next to me at one point. So I was talking to him, played the Babe, obviously, among many other big roles. And Bill Murray was there, and just a really cool event for baseball to show itself.
Years and years ago, back in the winter, spring of 1986, I spent a semester abroad in England. It was about 2 hours north of London, and I loved it. And I often tell people, if there was any other country I'd live in besides this country, England would be the place for me. I love the people, the culture, the scenery. I'm a big fan of all of it. But back in '86, it was really hard to be a baseball fan during spring training. And then at the start of the regular season, there was no internet. We didn't get any of the United States cable channels. So I'm not getting the scores of the Mets and Yankees every day. I'm not hearing trade rumors. I'm not getting any baseball information. But now with the internet, with television being more international than it was, 30 some odd years ago, now it's easier for a fan, let's say in London or throughout England, to actually follow baseball without being here in the States. So that's one of the great things about the society we have today. You can be an international baseball fan, and you can be really a fan up to the minute.
Yeah, I'm so glad you just said that, because it reminded me of a really fun conversation. I was walking through the bowels of the ballpark in London, and this guy stops me, a British guy stops me and says, you're the president of the Hall of Fame in Cooperstown? I said, yeah. He said, I've been a member of the Hall of Fame since the late 80s. He said the same thing you did. This was his way to follow baseball. He would literally, and I just pulled this off my desk, the hot off the presses, the new memories and dreams. This was how he kept track of baseball being over there. He said it was the only way I could really get baseball history. And it was so cool to talk to this British guy who has been following Major League Baseball that way. And his point was, now I can obviously track it on my phone 24/7, but back then my lifeblood was the Hall of Fame and your guys' publications. And it still to this day is for a lot of people around the world. But yeah, it's obviously a lot easier nowadays. And one other cool thing I'll share just before you move on is at the Diamondbacks, I did get to know Paul Goldschmidt really well. And one of the artifacts we brought back was actually from his cap from his game, because he's the first player to play 5 different countries a regular season major league game, which is pretty historic. He's been basically on several teams. And in fact, as it dawned on me, I've actually been in all 5 countries with him. He's played in the US, Canada, Mexico, Australia, and England, a regular season game in all of those countries. And that's, he was pretty excited just to know again that he was going to have something in the Hall of Fame. And it gave me a chance to catch up with him, and his family came over, made the trip, and took advantage of everything there was in London.
Wow. What do you think long-term about London getting a franchise? I mean, if it happens, it's probably many years away. Do you think it's feasible that baseball could go international, could go to Europe? What do you think of the chances of that?
Yeah, I know I've heard Commissioner Manfred talk in the past about wanting to try to have a franchise globally. And I think the cities that they've talked about, certainly in the past, Mexico City, where we actually were a month earlier, and London, those are some of the world-class cities that are close enough. Certainly you'd have to work out a lot of logistics. There's no doubt that traffic is challenging, and just if you're a big league player, if you had to come over and play probably a longer road trip than you would if you're not going to be going back and forth to London the way you would from Chicago to Philly. But I'm sure that as time goes on and transportation and all the various logistics are able to get worked out, it would not surprise me. I certainly wouldn't think that it's impossible that you could have a franchise abroad at some point, but that's for MLB to figure out and for us to document. And unfortunately, I don't get a say in it, but if they ever do, I will be over there at that first game for certain.
Josh, final question on the London series. You did mention that the London stadium was packed for the 2 games. How was that stadium for baseball? Did you sense they had to make a lot of changes to make it go from soccer to our game?
I'm sure they did, in much the same way when we played in Australia when I was with the Diamondbacks. They had to turn the Sydney Cricket Ground into a baseball stadium, and they reconfigure it and they figure out how to do it. But if you were just a fan sitting in the stands, I'm not sure that you could necessarily tell that we weren't in a baseball stadium. It just, the way they added certain seats down the line that were temporary to kind of make foul territory be the right amount. The distances it wasn't like there was a 150-foot porch down the left field line or anything like the Coliseum back in the day. So I mean, it really was, it really did feel like a baseball stadium, and they did an amazing, if anybody hasn't heard about the Home Run Derby X, they actually did a takeover of Trafalgar Square in the middle of London, and thousands of fans were out there at kind of a baseball fan fest. And you had former players like Johnny Gomes hitting home run derby inside a cage. But it's hard to explain. Google Home Run Derby X, and you'll see it's one of the ways they're trying to bring the game around the world, and I think it's working.
Very interesting. Let's talk about a few other topics. Something that we continue to be involved with here at the Hall of Fame. We did mention at the outset our Black Baseball Initiative. People want to learn more about it, go to our website, baseballhall.org/BBI, Black Baseball Initiative. Some fans have asked me this question over the last few months, and I guess I haven't been able to give them a good answer because I don't know the entire history. But some people are curious about how exactly this initiative gets started. Was it totally an in-house thing? Was it a suggestion from somebody outside the Hall of Fame? Where did this all begin?
It actually predates me. I mean, I got here, as you mentioned, in August of 21, and it was one of the first meetings I had was, look, unless you tell us otherwise and send us in a completely different direction, this is something we've been talking about for the last several years that really needs to happen. Both from a staff standpoint, our board of directors talked about it and just said, look, if we're going to continue to be what we want to be, the main repository for baseball history, an exhibit that's 25 years old focused on Black baseball really needs to be updated. And I think those conversations started as early as 2019. And then we hit the pandemic, unfortunately, and obviously things kind of slowed. We were just trying to do everything we could to stay open. And then once we opened back up and started getting people back in there, the question was, okay, what's the next big topic we're going to tackle? And this was an obvious one. It really is. It is so rich and so. As I've gotten a chance to learn more and more, I'm not even on the curatorial staff, but I get to sit in a lot of the meetings and with our curators and our archivists and librarians and people working on this exhibit, and it is just fascinating. I can't wait for people to come see it. It's really, as you mentioned earlier, it's the title is The Souls of the Game, but the subtitle is just as important. It's Voices of Black Baseball. And what I think is going to be really different about this is that it's going to be told through the voices of the people who lived the experience of being Black in baseball. And I think our last exhibit in 1997 was really kind of told from a curatorial perspective, like most museums tend to do. You research and you tell that story. And in this case, we're going to be really trying to use the voices of the people who actually experienced it and share the story that way.
Something that ties in with this, a recent visit by yourself and members of our Hall of Fame Education Department. You had a chance to travel to Paterson, New Jersey for some events at an historical ballpark called Hinchliffe Stadium. For those who are not familiar with the story of Hinchliffe, tell us how far back this stadium goes and how it's one of the few remaining remnants of Negro Leagues baseball.
Yeah, it's really basically two active Negro Leagues ballparks, this Hinchliffe and Rickwood Stadium down in Birmingham. And what's amazing about Hinchliffe is that they have been trying to renovate that stadium for 20 plus years. There's been a group called Friends of Hinchliffe that has gone through various mayors and other means in New Jersey of trying to get this done. And it wasn't really until the last 3 or 4 or 5 years that they basically got a ton of funding from the local government, state government to try to renovate it. And you can see it's an all turf field. On the photo on the right, we had all these cool kids from the local area coming in. They got a clinic with Major League Baseball down on the field. So that was right before it started. And you can kind of see in the middle of where all the kids are sitting, there's a plaque right there, which is pretty neat. We brought with us, in fact, it's right behind the kid throwing the first pitch. Yeah. We brought with us Larry Doby's plaque. And Larry was not only played there when he was in his younger years, this is actually the field that he tried out on. Hinchliffe Stadium, he grew up around the corner from there, tried out on this field, was signed by Newark and Effa Manley, who many know is the only female Hall of Famer, and basically launched his baseball career literally right in that exact spot where I'm standing catching the first pitch. He's hitting home runs there. So his son, Larry Jr. was there. Willie Randolph came. It was a really cool event. And I think the kids learned a lot about history. We all had a chance to learn quite a bit of the history of the stadium. And the building right behind there, that's behind the plaque, is actually, they're going to have a museum on the history of Hinchliffe Stadium. So all of that is coming soon, and we were honored to be there and be a part of it.
I believe Hinchliffe is one of only 5 Negro Leagues ballparks that still exist to this day. The one you mentioned, Rickwood Field, is probably the most famous of those 5, but certainly Hinchliffe is up there. It is home to a ball team today, a minor league team, the Jackals.
Yeah, they actually, this was all kind of pregame for their game on Juneteenth. So we went down there specifically on Juneteenth to make this announcement of the name of the exhibit, as well as many of our key funding partners, the Yawkey Foundation and Bill Janicek and Tony Yosoloff, some of our longtime donors, NBT Bank. All of these people have helped us create this exhibit. And so we did all that, and then as soon as basically this first pitch happened, we watched the game that was played there. And actually, it's an independent league team, but it's incredibly high caliber baseball. We had the plaque on the concourse, and the fans were coming by and got to take pictures with Larry Doby's plaque, which doesn't happen very often. That we don't bring these out of Cooperstown a whole heck of a lot. And so during the game, it was there for about 5 innings, and fans were enjoying it. And yeah, I think we're looking forward to hopefully more events down there in the future.
So you were the catcher for the first pitch, right?
Yes, you can tell by the bald spot on the back of my head. That is me.
Did you catch it cleanly?
I did. As I recall, it was more about the throw. He threw it cleanly, and so all I had to do was catch it. But yeah, it was pretty special. There was a few of us. It was myself, Larry Doby Jr., Willie Randolph. We all caught first pitches 3 in a row from these local kids, and they loved it. I mean, it's just such a special thing this is in their neighborhood now. This is where they're going to get to, in much the same way we play our Cooperstown plays their pony games and their high school games at Doubleday Field. These kids in these photos are going to get to play at Hinchliffe, and that's pretty awesome.
Looking at the photograph on the right, looks like a pretty wide range of ages for these kids.
Yeah, so MLB has their Play Ball initiative, and so I think it's from I want to say age 5 to 12, and so different stations they had different, obviously depending on the level of talent and what age kids there were. They had different stations, and one of them was coming over and getting to see the plaque as well. So it's both on. It was pretty hot that day. Those kids were toasty. Probably not my best day to wear a suit, but nonetheless, it was really just an incredibly well done facility now. After honestly, many years of disrepair, and they were going to tear the ballpark down, and thankfully it got saved and is now back to being an active ballpark for the minor league team and for these kids to play on.
Gosh, tell us about some of the interesting personalities you met down there, a few celebrities.
Yeah, Larry Doby Jr. for sure was really impressive to me. I loved talking to him. I had not had a chance to get to know him at all, and I really, when you talk about someone who often gets overlooked in the history of baseball, his father faced every ounce of scrutiny and challenges that Jackie Robinson did, but because he was second or first in the American League, often kind of gets forgotten. Certainly not by those who understand baseball history, but maybe by kind of the masses who just know the name Jackie Robinson. So spending a good amount of time with Larry Jr. was really pretty special. I mentioned Willie Randolph. That was pretty cool. We didn't even know he was coming. He was good friends with the general manager of the team there at the Jackals. And so Willie showed up there, and we got to catch up with him and tell him a little bit about what this project is. And I was a second baseman growing up, so he was one of my favorites. And to spend some time talking to him and understand again, just kind of what he as one of the more successful Black managers in baseball, and certainly the work that he's doing to help the game continue to grow in Black communities is important.
GM, you mentioned Bobby Jones, one of several Bobby Jones to have played in the major leagues. I think this was the one who was a left-hand pitcher, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, pitched several years in the bigs and was now he's gone on to a second career of running this minor league franchise, but just incredibly gracious. His whole staff could not have been better at making sure we felt at home and that we could put on this really cool event a few hours from Cooperstown.
It was during the trip to Hinchliffe that the Hall of Fame also held a press conference, officially announced the name of its new exhibit, The Souls of the Game, which you talked about earlier. You also talked about kind of the subtitle to that as well. Now, I guess we should clarify that the idea for The Souls of the Game, there was a film about the Negro Leagues that I think came out in the late 1990s. The name does not come from that. It comes from another source, correct?
Correct, yeah. So it's interesting. There's been a number of There's that Negro Leagues movie, which certainly I think there's no reason why we can't tip our caps to that film. But there was a famous W.E.B. Du Bois book called The Souls of Black Folk, which really is kind of required reading, as I've been told from anybody in the Black community. That's one of the first things you read from the earliest days of kind of mass printing of books. I've gotten a chance to read and absolutely love what that allows us to do, tip our caps to W.E.B. Du Bois. And at the same time, there's actually another incredible book that's out there called The Soul of Baseball, which is the book of Joe Posnanski, that he wrote that about Buck O'Neill. Mm-hmm. So from our standpoint, when you think about the history, the souls who have lived the game of baseball, and then telling it through the Black voices, that's really what we were going for. And I'm certainly proud of the title, but I think we're all going to be even more proud of what that exhibit and what the whole initiative can be for anybody who loves baseball and baseball history. I think it's going to have some staying power for a long time to come.
Josh, can you give us a little bit of a sense of how expansive the exhibit will be, where it's going to be featured? I know there's going to be like a main exhibit, but there's also going to be certainly mentions of the history of Black baseball in other parts of the museum. But if you could talk a little bit about the breadth and scope of this.
Sure. So if anybody's familiar, if you've been here and you've spent much time on the second floor, that's where Ideals and Injustices is. And that this will completely, it's not like, this is not an update to that exhibit. This is really actually much more of a complete redo of the exhibit start to finish, but it'll be in the same footprint. So there will be a period of time early next year where we will have to close Ideals and Injustices while we kind of change out the entire area. It's also going to expand, as you mentioned, Bruce, a little bit beyond there, both in the immediate area outside, but also kind of we keep more internally than anything. We've been referring to that as the heartbeat of the exhibit, kind of that main area. But the arteries really are going to go out into all the different areas of the museum. So whether it's the Taking the Field exhibit that focuses on the 1800s, that may allow us to put some new stuff in there that we've learned in the last couple decades about Bud Fowler. Or if you're talking about Diamond Dreams, it might allow us to touch on some of the key Black women who helped create the game of baseball. There's any number of examples. The Shoebox Treasures, baseball cards, or Autumn Glory. I think as you go around the museum, you'll see that what we're trying to do is not just have one exhibit that focuses on Black baseball, but really kind of update the way we talk about the history of Black baseball. And we can do that all throughout the museum with kind of some subtle things and some not so subtle things. And hopefully when we're done with it, people will think we did it well.
Will Viva Baseball, the exhibit about Latinos in the game, will that also be somewhat of an extension too?
Absolutely, and that's actually one of the things we talked a lot about is how do we represent the fact that in the earliest days, when dark-skinned Latino players started to play baseball, really it had less to do with whether you were speaking Spanish or English and more to do with the color of your skin as to how you were treated. And so we had a lot of conversations about what exactly is this exhibit going to be. We thought because we do have Viva Baseball, we'll be able to find some ways to update that. And I should say, as I say Viva Baseball, I think again of John Odell, who was the main curator on that exhibit and was so proud of that. I think we'll have an opportunity to tell the story of Black baseball all throughout the museum, and also find a way to make sure that people realize that it kind of when the biggest challenges were going on, it really had more to do with the color of your skin than where you actually grew up.
Yeah, this is such an important point, and it's something we talk about when we do our civil rights educational unit. You know, Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier obviously benefited Black players born in this country, but it was equally as beneficial to the Latino players who were Black. Roberto Clemente, who often referred to himself as a double minority, Minnie Minoso, players like that, they would not have been able to play in the major leagues without Jackie Robinson breaking that barrier, or somebody breaking that barrier, because they were regarded as dark-skinned Latinos, and they were essentially kind of grouped into that same category that was banned from the game from 1887 until 1947. So again, our Souls of the Game exhibit scheduled to open spring of 2024. And our curators still working hard on that exhibit, and they'll be working hard on it right up until its opening next year. Coming up a little sooner, though, preparations do continue for this year's Hall of Fame weekend. It, I guess, unofficially starts on Thursday, July 20th, but officially begins the Friday, July 21st, runs through Saturday, Sunday. The final event is the Legends Roundtable on Monday. You're now a veteran of this, Josh. This will be your second full-fledged induction, so you have a much better idea of what's going on. I'm curious, as Hall of Fame president, what do you see as really your primary duty or duties for this weekend?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, anybody who's been here, there's so much going on in so many different places. And before I tell you my duties, I'll tell you the thing that blows my mind is that this town of 1,700 people, you look at the photo down there on the bottom right and you think, how do we do this? It's because a lot of people work really hard to pull this off. And so I think my job, I guess, in a lot of ways is to be aware of what's happening everywhere. Obviously, I can't be in all places at once. And so what I tend to spend a lot of my time on really is the actual high profile events themselves. So we've got 50 plus returning Hall of Famers, and making sure that they're all essentially well taken care of. One of the best things that we do here is make sure that these guys want to come back year after year. And so with that comes we've got Saturday's event where we're honoring our Buck O'Neill Award winner and our Frick Award winner and BBWAA Award winner. So I'll be a part of that on stage. I'll be a part of the actual stage ceremony on Sunday. Though it's funny, that photo on the right, very quick funny story behind it. This was right at the end of the event last year, and Dave Winfield had spoken on behalf of Bud Fowler and did an incredible job of speaking on his behalf. And then when we went to take the photo, nobody could find Dave Winfield. So I said, Josh, hold that thing. And I went, oh man, I definitely do not belong in this photo. That should be Dave Winfield holding Mr. Fowler's plaque. But there's so many moving parts, and as you can imagine, with any big event, things go wrong all the time. Something is happening that we have to try to fix or remedy, whether it's weather that's happening. So it's just a constant juggling act. And I would love to think that I can just sit and watch it all happen, but unfortunately, it's probably more like controlled chaos that's always going on. And I'm a bit of the conductor along with a lot of other people.
For those who have never been to Hall of Fame weekend, and boy, it's something I highly recommend to any baseball fan, try to do it at least once during your lifetime. But there are a lot of focal points. It's not just the induction site. You've got things going on at Doubleday Field, which has just been newly renovated. There was an announcement made earlier today at the Hall of Fame, a ribbon cutting for the newly renovated ballpark, which first opened back in 1920. You've got events going on at Glimmerglass Opera, like the awards presentation on Saturday. You've got the Hall of Fame and Museum itself. We can't forget about that. And you've got the Otissaga Hotel, where all the Hall of Famers and all the baseball dignitaries are spending a good amount of their time during the weekend. So you and a lot of other staff are sort of hopping between, these 5 or 6 different central focal points. It's a bit crazy.
It is, and honestly, I think one of my favorite events that I forgot to mention already is the parade. And if you haven't been here for that, you just pick a spot on Main Street and you literally watch as 50 plus living legends roll by you, just feet in front of you, and make their way into the Hall of Fame for a reception. It's pretty amazing. I mean, as you said, Bruce, you've gotta, if you haven't come, find a year to come. It's not too late to get in the car and drive up right now. You can find accommodations, not necessarily in Cooperstown, but certainly in some of the surrounding towns. You can find a way to stay overnight if you're a little bit too far. But this is a great year to come. McGriff and Rolen are going to be a fantastic class, but because we don't have 7 like we had last year, we only have 2 inductees. I think that probably makes it a little bit more manageable. I don't know that we're going to see 80,000 people, but tens of thousands of people like you see in that photo are going to be here. And it's a pretty amazing, those 2 guys are very well deserving, and it's a great year to come and check it out. You can literally start coming down on Friday.
I'm glad you mentioned the parade, because it is my favorite event of the weekend, and it's relatively new compared to some of the other programs that take place here in Cooperstown during Hall of Fame weekend. I get the job, which I take a lot of pride in. It's a lot of fun too. I serve as a spotter for Brian Kenny, the master of ceremonies, during the parade. I have to identify for him, which Hall of Famer is coming in which vehicle. They do give us a general order at the beginning, in terms of, well, this is the order they'll be coming in. And most of the time they stick to that order, but sometimes there are changes made, and I have to be aware of that. Last year was blistering hot, and I'm on that concrete on Main Street. I think I had 3 waters to begin with. I plowed through those, so I had no more water left. And luckily, the people in the crowd who are so great, they could see I was struggling a little bit. And I think that there had to be at least 2 or 3 people that offered me new bottles of water that hadn't been opened, and they helped me out. And if not, I might have had to retire a little early from that event.
Well, please don't do that. And we got to make sure you got enough, not only enough water, bring sunscreen if you're coming, because Sunday's event can be hot. That's the one thing we can't control here is obviously weather. And so there are years. We certainly have a backup rain plan that we don't want to have to enact if you wind up with severe weather. We do it rain or shine, but if there's lightning in the area, we obviously have to be careful. And but yeah, you can come out. You can actually, it's completely free. I mean, it's crazy to me to think that tens of thousands of people show up, and it's a free event. You can put your blanket out the day before, or your lawn chairs, set it up the day before, leave it there, and then it'll be there for you when you show up the next day. There's no crime in Cooperstown. It's just people are happy to be there. They're looking out for you, Bruce, in the water, and they're honestly, they're here to celebrate Scott and Fred and all the other legends.
And just to clarify, the museum does not close during Hall of Fame weekend. We have actually one day we have extended hours in the morning, and the other days, I think that with the exception of one night, we stay open till our normal summer closing time of 7 p.m.
Exactly. Yeah, we have to close it a little early on Saturday because we've got the event that there's a private event in there following the parade. But other than that, the extra hours, and yes, it's busy. It's kind of part of the fun when you're standing in there amidst all these other like-minded baseball fans. It's a pretty cool experience.
Have you been looking at the weather every day?
I definitely take a look, but one thing I've been told, this is actually, so I was here for I started just a couple days before the 2021 induction, Jeter and Ted Simmons, among others, Larry Walker and Marvin Miller. And that whole, for those that were here or remember, I mean, we were down to the minute. We were watching as like the rain and the thunder and lightning was coming our way. And we knew about 20 minutes after Jeter finished speaking, it was going to be opening the skies. And sure enough, that's what happened. Last year, again, we had to adjust a little bit. We actually shortened the introductions of the Hall of Famers who were returning because we wanted to make sure we got it in ahead of an expected storm. So I do pay attention to it, but the crazy thing is around here, you also could have an absolutely perfect day and you won't know until that morning. So we're just going to keep playing it by ear, and that shouldn't impact anybody's fans and any fans' decision to come and enjoy the weekend.
Let's talk a little bit about two of the centers of attention for Hall of Fame weekend. Two new members of the Hall of Fame, bringing our total membership to 342 players, managers, executives, umpires, pioneers of the game. We see Fred McGriff on the left, Scott Rolen on the right. I know that you have had a chance to meet with both of them. They took their orientation tour a couple of months ago here in Cooperstown. Tell us a little bit about their personalities. Let's begin with Fred McGriff.
Well, it's interesting. They're both definitely a little less outgoing than, say, David Ortiz. They're both pretty soft-spoken guys. Fred, I got to know actually in 2003 when I was at the Dodgers. We had 1 year with him, and he's just as classy a human as there is. He's waited a long time to get this call, and I give him credit. He could be bitter. He could wonder why it took so long, but instead he's just incredibly grateful and humbled to be here. And he's been working hard on his speech. I will say that he has put a lot of effort into making sure that he says the right things about the right people, and I think look, I'd be surprised if anybody isn't nervous to stand up in front of thousands and tens of thousands of people and try to remember to thank all the people who helped you get there. But I think you can almost see it there. Like if this photo continued another 4 seconds, if this was a video, he just has the biggest smile. The guy, I just remember him at the Dodgers. Every time I'd have to go ask him for something, he'd give me like a quizzical look, and then he'd burst into this huge grin. He's just an amazing guy, and I'm pretty excited for him.
Also have to mention, he's one of the rare Hall of Famers who looks a little bit thinner now than during his playing days. He has not put any extra weight on.
No, he does a lot of rowing. He said he's got a rowing machine, and I think he plays a lot of golf, but he keeps himself in good shape. And he was never a particularly, for a guy who hit 492 or 3 home runs, I think it is, he was never a particularly like bulky guy. And he was actually kind of just steady Eddie. At one point he was talking about knowing that if he hit X amount of homers and X amount of RBIs every month, he would look up and he'd have 30 and 100. And sure enough, he did that almost every year for practically 15 years.
How about Scott Rolen?
Yeah, Scott's another quieter guy. He's not boisterous. He's not a look at me sort of guy, but I know how much this means to him. And he actually lives in Bloomington, Indiana, which is where I went to school. So he and I have bonded quite a bit over our shared love of Indiana sports and Dave Matthews Band. Those are the things that we've been talking about lately. But he is humbled is probably the best way to put it. And I think you could say that about all of these Hall of Famers. But we just did a news conference with them a couple of days ago, and Scott was saying, the idea that it's Babe Ruth and Henry Aaron and Scott Rolen, he's like, I just don't belong with that group. I'll never believe that I belong with that group. And yet he is one of the 1%, the top 1% that have ever played the game of baseball, which is who really ultimately gets enshrined in Cooperstown. So again, I know he also worked hard at his speech. I feel like he's ready to go. I texted him a few days ago and said, how we looking? He said, I'm in great shape. And if you do it, for those that are going to be here this weekend or anytime over the course of the next year, on the 3rd floor, you'll see we have an inductee case for each of our new inductees. So we have great artifacts from both Fred and Scott that you can go and check out. It's upstairs right by the Your Team Today, which has all the different lockers for the 30 teams and their World Series rings and gold gloves and silver sluggers, pieces of their career. You're going to hear a lot of, I wouldn't be surprised if both of them end up with some tears coming down. My money's on Scott for sure to cry. I don't know if Fred will, but I feel like I can guarantee Scott will cry at some point.
Had you met Scott before this year?
Yeah, through a friend actually at Indiana University where I went to school had connected us because his daughter is best friends with Scott's daughter. And so he's been telling me for years, if this guy ever gets inducted, you're going to love him. You got to meet him. And so I was able to connect with him right after I got this job, but I had not met him prior to that.
Also to be honored this weekend, this is always an interesting award. It's never presented more than every 3 years. And even then, it doesn't necessarily have to be given out every 3 years, but it's not given out every year. Most would be every third year. This year, the Buck O'Neill Award, Lifetime Achievement Award, will be presented to one of the oldest surviving of the Brooklyn Dodgers, great pitcher Carl Erskine. He will not be coming to Cooperstown because he's in his late 90s at this point. Travel's a bit difficult. But his son Gary is going to accept for him at the Saturday awards presentation. But I imagine you've already talked to Carl Erskine. Give us your thoughts on him.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to meet him once when I was at the Dodgers back in the day, but it had been quite some time since, and we had actually emailed a little bit shortly after this. And I was very fortunate to be the one who actually called him and let him know. Unfortunately, Jane Forbes Clark, who normally makes that phone call, we were having a tough time tracking them down because they don't answer phone numbers of those they don't know. So we actually had to go to somebody in Anderson, Indiana and say, hey, can someone knock on the Erskine's door and tell them we're trying to reach them? And so as I was able to let him know, you could just feel how much this meant to him. I mean, this is a lifetime of service, well beyond what he did as a Brooklyn Dodger. He really, truly, whether it was the Special Olympics or the baseball assistance team, fellowship of Christian athletes, he has truly given his life to others, given back to others. And there is just such a gratitude in the family that, again, he said, I can't believe that I'm the guy that you're giving this to. And I think it was very clear the board of directors believes that he not only earned it, but as unfortunately, like you said, he can't be here. When I said, I don't know if you guys are going to be able to make it to Cooperstown, and his wife said, he doesn't make it down the hall for dinner. I don't think we're going to get to Cooperstown. But like you said, at 96, we know he'll be locked in online, paying attention to it all. And he is as honored as anyone. There's been very few people to receive this award. So it's a huge honor for him and his family.
One of the causes that he's been greatly involved with is Down syndrome. One of his sons was born with Down syndrome. And that has always been a cause very close to his heart and something that he has been involved with for decades.
Yeah, I think if anybody wants to get a good chance to understand who he is, they actually just recently did a film about his life. And it talks about his son, Jimmy. You can Google it. I believe it's on YouTube, but it's a Carl Erskine movie if you search it. This was in the early days, Down syndrome. Quite often when somebody was diagnosed with Down syndrome, a lot of times they were sent off to a home somewhere. And Carl and Betty said, that's not what we're doing with Jimmy. I'm going to move back from Brooklyn, move back to Anderson, Indiana, and we're going to raise him and we're going to make him part of our family. And obviously that's probably more common nowadays, but back then that may not have been as common. And he really truly dove into it. And Jimmy's still alive in his 60s, which is quite old for someone with Down syndrome, but was involved in Special Olympics for decades. And like you said, Carl has given tons of time and energy to the cause of Down syndrome.
I mentioned his other son, Gary, will be accepting for him in Cooperstown. Have you had a chance to talk to Gary?
I did. I spoke to him and their daughter, Susie, right after I called Carl. I wanted to call them and make sure that they knew and that they fully understood exactly kind of the knowing that they would likely have to accept it. And you can just, both of them were incredibly touched, moved to tears as I was talking to them about, nobody gives the way that Carl gives with the expectation that it's going to give you something back. I think the best of us, and I believe that may have been, I think that may be the name of the film, is The Best of Us. You do it because it's the right thing to do. And ultimately for him, after 96 years, to be alive and to know that somebody looked at what he's done over the last 100 years and believes it's worthy of this award, you could tell how much that meant to the kids as well.
In addition to Carl Erskine, at the Saturday award ceremony, we'll be paying honor to longtime broadcaster Pat Hughes and also great baseball writer John Lowe. So they will be part of that award ceremony, which will actually take place at the Glimmerglass Opera. It's a private ceremony, but it will be simulcast on a big screen at Doubleday Field, and that's actually where I'll be on Saturday afternoon and Saturday evening. So that is coming up. And just to recap, Hall of Fame weekend does officially begin this Friday, July 21st. The first event in the morning is Turn 2 with Ozzie Smith at Doubleday Field. And that will kick off a parade of many other programs and events Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, July 21st through July 24th. Josh, before we let you go, just a couple of other topics to talk about, looking ahead a little toward the fall. Mid-September, these guys will be coming to Doubleday Field to play in a special game. They'll be playing their usual rivals, the Party Animals, but the Savannah Bananas, who have become a sensation. And as I just saw earlier today, I believe the game has officially sold out at Doubleday Field. So this will be coming up. It'll be a daytime game on Saturday, September 16th. A lot of people curious, what is the Hall of Fame's involvement with this?
You know, this kind of it's our event, essentially. While we don't own Doubleday Field, the Village does. We kind of, when we started our conversations with Jesse Cole, the owner of the Bananas, we had a couple things in mind. One is that we wanted to bring in a couple of the artifacts to kind of document the history of what this group is doing, because I think most people now have heard of them, but they're essentially the Harlem Globetrotters of baseball. It is high level baseball, but with guys on stilts and TikTok dances and bats on fire and crazy music and just so much cool stuff. We thought we should document this. And so we called Jesse and we said we want to document it. And we knew deep down that was likely going to spark the idea of playing it at Doubleday. And before we had hung up the phone, all of us agreed that we needed to pull this off. So we went to the Village here in Cooperstown and asked them, could we rent the field and essentially host this game? So we're really kind of serving as the hosts. And as you mentioned, it is honestly, the worst part is that the stadium only holds about 6,000 fans. They're selling out 10, 15,000 seat stadiums everywhere around the country. And I think next year they're going to be in big league ballparks. So it is in fact very challenging to get a ticket. And we did everything we could to try to take care of our museum members if we could, local Cooperstown people. But if you didn't get it today when they went on sale, I know StubHub and the secondary market is out there selling them, and it's way more than probably what we would want our fans to have to pay. But the show is pretty special, and we're pretty excited for the 16th of September.
This guy we see here, the stilt player, his real name is Dakota. And from what I understand, he's going to be part of the traveling group that will come to Cooperstown. I was trying to think what parts of the museum he would fit into with the stilts. I don't think he fits in on the third floor or the second floor. I don't think the ceiling's high enough, but Plaque Gallery would be pretty good for him.
Oh, that's awesome. I had not thought about that. But where the new exhibit that we're going to put in, it's several cases of artifacts focused on the Savannah Bananas. It is on the first floor over by Scribes and Mikeman, which people often refer to as the kind of writer and broadcasters wing. Stilts will hopefully be there for the ribbon cutting. We are going to have a big event for people who either didn't get a chance to buy tickets but still want to meet the Bananas on Friday night of that weekend, September 15th. Just with a regular museum ticket, these guys are going to be walking around and meeting the fans and hanging out. And so we encourage people, if you didn't get a chance to get tickets to the game, come on out to the Hall of Fame on Friday, and you'll get a chance to see these guys walking around the building. It's pretty cool. And I don't know where we're going to have to put this guy, but he seems like a good dude.
I know that in the past, they've had a couple of former major league players on their roster. At one point, Eric Burns was their manager. Any sense on former big leaguers that are with them now?
It actually has been changing quite a bit. So you're right. I know Johnny Gomes, Jake Peavy, Eric Gagne, a number of guys that I know have actually told me that they've played with them. Actually, Bill Lee, Spaceman Bill Lee, is the one that's kind of there every game. He's a full-time member of the traveling party. But I have no doubt that we will not only have some of their big leaguers. I wouldn't be surprised if we get some of our Hall of Famers who want to be a part of this in September. It really is. I mean, I've had friends all around the country tell me, man, you guys are so lucky you got these guys when you did, because they're getting so big that they're going to be too big for Doubleday Field pretty quickly. And I encourage everybody to come on out on Friday night if you didn't get tickets. If you did get tickets, check out this game. Everybody has told me it's just an unbelievable show.
So again, that'll be coming up September 16th, Doubleday Field right here in Cooperstown. We have just a couple of minutes remaining with Josh. Let's spend the rest of the time checking in on some of our comments in the chat room. We have one message from one of our faithful followers, Ted Knorr, and he wanted to make a point about our friend John Odell. Ted writes, God bless John Odell. He was very instrumental in Sabres 2021 APBA-driven simulation of a what-if 1921 World Series between the New York Giants and the Chicago American Giants, a Negro Leagues team. John was wonderful to work with, and his fingerprints were all over the result of that 1921 World Series simulation. So we thank Ted for that remembrance of John. We have someone named Devin who apparently knows you. Hi, Josh. It's Devin Grossman, your fraternity brother from Indiana. You're looking great. Hope you are enjoying the job as much as it seems. You know this fella?
I do. It was my little brother in my fraternity back in college, and I saw him on the list of people on here and was wondering if it was the same one. So good to reconnect with all my old friends, and he knew back then how much I love baseball. So people like that who have known me since I was 18, 19, 20 years old, I think it's kind of nuts that anybody would think that I'd get to do this job at any point in my life. So thanks, Thibaut.
A comment from Ron. Had the pleasure of meeting Carl Erskine and Johnny Padres in 2005 when the Hall honored the 1955 Dodgers. His book, What I Learned from Jackie Robinson, is great. I was lucky enough to be at the Hall of Fame that time, and had a real nice time talking to Carl Erskine. That was a real pleasure. Here's a question. Don't know if you've seen this film, but I'll throw it out to you, Josh. It comes from Martin Brody. Martin writes, I recently saw The League, a film about Negro Leagues baseball. It's gotten rave reviews. Can you speak a little bit about the film? Have you seen it, Josh?
I did, yeah. They actually reached out to us when they were kind of about, the film was just about getting done, and they were asking what we could do to try to help promote it. So we actually, when it debuted at the Tribeca Film Festival about 2 months ago, we brought with us Rube Foster's plaque down there, and the people on the red carpet, including Questlove, who helped make the film, got a chance to see the plaque up close. And Rube is heavily featured in the film. It really is. It does a tremendous job of giving you the history of the Negro Leagues. And that's one of the things that I keep trying to remind people about our Black Baseball Initiative, is that while the Negro Leagues is definitely going to be a section of it, obviously there's an incredible Negro Leagues museum in Kansas City that focuses on that period of 40 years. We're going to try to touch on more like 150 to 200 years, and we can't get it all into one exhibit, but we are the Negro. If you're a big Negro Leagues fan, I highly recommend that film, The League. I highly recommend the Negro Leagues Museum in Kansas City, and hopefully when you see ours, you'll see that'll be a piece of a big puzzle.
And a final question comes to us from Francis. Have any other plaques traveled out of the hall recently that are reference to the Larry Doby plaque? But there have been some others in recent years that have also made their way around the country.
Yeah, what we try to do for each of the inductees, and I know we'll be doing that for both Fred McGriff and Scott Rolen. The dates off the top of my head I don't have, but if you check out the websites, I believe that the McGriff plaque is going to make its way to Atlanta. I think the Rolen plaque is going to get to St. Louis, both in August. We've taken Satchel Paige's plaque to the Negro Leagues Museum before. We try very hard. Last year we had a chance with each of the inductees. I brought Minnie Mignoso's plaque to Chicago, and Jim Cotton, Oliva to Minnesota. So we don't do it very often, and it's pretty rare that any singular plaque goes somewhere more than once. For the most part, we want people, when they come to Cooperstown, if they've made that pilgrimage that they've been wanting to come to for so many years, we want them to be able to see that plaque when they get here. So we try not to take it out very often, but those are some that have happened recently.
As we wrap up this week's program, I want to mention our website. It's baseballhall.org. If you go there, you're going to be noticing some changes in the formatting, the way that the website looks. We've been gradually making some changes, updating the website, making it a little bit more user-friendly, more visually attractive. And if you do go to the website, right on the homepage, you can see at the top in the circle, there is a tab for donating. If you want to donate to the Hall of Fame, whatever the amount of money might be, we certainly appreciate those efforts. Hit the donate tab, and you can fill out a form, and lots of different amounts of money. Even if you're not able to give a lot at this point in time, whatever you can give is certainly something that we do appreciate and welcome here in Cooperstown. Our guest, Hall of Fame President Josh Rawitch. Josh, I'll let you get back to Hall of Fame weekend planning, but thanks for being with us this past hour.
That's been great, Bruce. Thanks so much. And I hope to see all of you, if not this weekend, some other time here in Cooperstown. You guys are all welcome anytime.
Our thanks to Josh and all of our viewers for taking part in Virtual Voices of the Game with Josh Rawitch, the president of the Hall of Fame. Again, Hall of Fame weekend comes up in just a couple of days, officially beginning Friday, July 21st. Thanks, everyone. Hope you enjoyed the show. Have a great day, everybody.